Why is it that the absolute cheapest, most inferior staple foods actually become more sought after when they get more expensive?
Right. It seems totally backward.
It really does. Or, I mean, think about this. How is it possible that a few years ago, the global price of a barrel of oil literally dropped below zero?
Meaning producers were actually paying people to take it away.
Exactly. Only to see those same prices absolutely skyrocket just a short time later. So today we are looking at the invisible, sometimes entirely irrational mathematical laws that decide the price of literally everything around you.
Every single thing.
Yeah. From the device you were using to listen to this deep dive, to the coffee on your desk and, the shoes on your feet.
We tend to just look at the price tag on an item and, well, we accept it as a fixed property of the object, like almost like its weight or its color.
Right. It's just 20 bucks. That's what it is.
Exactly. But it is anything but fixed. It is actually a snapshot of this incredibly complex, ongoing human drama.
And deciphering that drama is our entire mission today. We are taking a deep dive into a really comprehensive economic primer. It's simply titled The Mechanics of Market Pricing and Equilibrium.
Which is quite a mouthful.
It is. And I know what you might be thinking listening to this. Economic textbooks, supply and demand curves. It sounds dry.
It sounds like something you were forced to memorize for, like a multiple choice test in high school.
Yeah, no, totally.
This subject suffers from a really serious branding problem, honestly, just because of how it's usually taught. We get so bogged down in the algebra that we completely forget the psychology.
Well, our goal today is to rescue the law of supply and demand from those dusty textbooks. Because when you actually strip away all the jargon, what you are left with isn't a bunch of math equations.
Not at all.
It's this deeply fascinating study of human behavior,
Hmm.
of our necessities and our desire. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand how prices fluctuate today, we actually have to go back in time.
We do.
Yeah.
We need to look at how our whole understanding of what a price even is has evolved.
Right, like where did the idea of setting a price originally come from?
Well, if you go back to the medieval era, thinkers approached the concept of a price from a heavily moral and ethical standpoint.
Okay.
They believed in something called a just price. The prevailing philosophy was that the price of an item should be based strictly on what it cost to produce it.
So just the materials and the labor.
Exactly. Materials, labor, plus maybe a very modest, equitable return for the seller so they could survive. And that was it.
Wow.
It was a fixed ethical calculation designed purely to prevent exploitation.
I mean, that sounds incredibly reasonable, honestly. You put in a specific amount of work, you get a specific fair amount of money back. Why didn't we just stick with that system?
It's a very comforting way to view the world, for sure. And the source actually notes that many modern critics of market pricing still kind of long for this moral framework.
Especially when it comes to things like essential commodities, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. But the just price model has a pretty fatal flaw. It completely ignores human desire and the reality of scarcity. It assumes the value of a thing is like injected into it by the creator rather than perceived by the buyer.
Which brings us to the Enlightenment thinkers.
Precisely. Economists during the Enlightenment period completely shifted the paradigm. They realized that price isn't a moral judgment at all.
Right.
Price is actually a signaling mechanism. It's this massive, decentralized communication network that connects total strangers across the globe.
Instead of asking what is fair, they started asking what the price tells us about the people buying and selling.
Exactly.
And that realization birthed the two halves of the economic engine that our primer outlines. Let's look at the first half, which is the law of demand.
Right, the buyer's side.
Yeah. This describes our behavior as buyers. It basically states that demand and price have an inverse relationship. As prices rise, demand falls, and as prices fall, demand increases.
And the underlying reason for that inverse relationship is simply that buyers have finite resources. I mean, our wallets are not bottomless. Right. So if something gets more expensive, we simply cannot buy as much of it, no matter how much we might want to.
Then on the other side of the engine, you have the law of supply, which governs the sellers.
And this relationship is direct.
Right. Higher prices encourage a greater quantity supplied. A higher price acts as a flashing green light to suppliers. It basically screams, hey, there is a profit incentive here. Make more of this.
Yes. Conversely, lower prices result in a cost squeeze, which forces suppliers to reduce their output.
And if you visualize this on a graph, which I know we're avoiding textbooks, but
Just a mental graph.
yeah, the supply curve is sloping upward, chasing those profits, while the demand curve is sloping downward, restricted by our finite wallets.
And the entire system is just seeking balance at the exact point where those two lines intersect.
The primer calls that intersection the market clearing price. It's the equilibrium.
That is the moment where the quantity sellers want to sell perfectly, matches the quantity buyers are willing to buy.
So everyone's happy.
Exactly. There is no surplus supply rotting in warehouses somewhere, and there is no unmet demand from frustrated shoppers.
The source uses a really great analogy to make this mechanism visual, focusing on winter coats.
Oh yeah, the department store example.
Yeah. So let's imagine a department store in autumn. The new, heavy winter coats arrive. The prices are high, but there's a specific group of shoppers who are terrified of the impending cold and want those coats right now.
So they happily pay full price.
Right. But the season moves on. Fast forward to the end of winter, the weather is warming up.
And at that point, the shoppers who desperately needed a coat, well, they already have one. The remaining shoppers don't really feel any urgency at all.
So the store is just sitting on this surplus of inventory that is rapidly losing its appeal.
And they are forced to lower the prices.
And that lower price suddenly attracts a totally new wave of buyers. People who wouldn't pay full price but are happy to grab a deal and stash the coat in their closet for next year.
Crucially, though, that same low price serves as a red light to the manufacturer.
Because there's no profit left.
Right. The store stops ordering new coats. The prices just keep adjusting downward until the exact number of leftover coats matches the exact number of people willing to buy them at that steep discount. The market clears.
I have to push back on this model, though.
Okay, sure.
The winter coat example assumes the store actually wants to get rid of the inventory to clear the racks. But what about cartels? Like, think about the diamond industry. Historically, they hoard vast amounts of diamonds in vaults to artificially restrict the supply. Doesn't that completely break this elegant market-clearing model?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, cartels and monopolies don't actually break the laws of supply and demand. They weaponize them.
Oh, wow. Weaponize them.
By locking those diamonds in a vault, they are forcibly shifting the supply curve to the left. They're creating artificial scarcity.
So the math still works, it's just rigged.
Exactly. The market still finds an equilibrium price based on that restricted supply. It's just an equilibrium that heavily favors the seller. Whether the scarcity is natural or artificial, the signaling mechanism of price discovery remains the absolute baseline of how society allocates resources.
Man, it is a ruthless kind of math. But my other issue with the winter coat analogy is that it makes human behavior seem perfectly proportional and perfectly rational.
Which we are not.
Right. We don't treat all goods equally. I mean, a winter coat on clearance is very different from, say, insulin.
Yeah.
Or drinking water.
That brings us to a massive variable in all of this, which is price elasticity. Elasticity measures how responsive we are to a change in price.
Okay.
If an item has high price elasticity, a tiny price increase will cause a huge drop in demand. People will just stop buying it.
But the source explicitly calls out necessities as being heavily inelastic.
Because you simply cannot live without them. I mean, basic food staples, essential medications, the fuel you literally need to get to your job.
Yeah.
If the price of those necessities spikes, your demand doesn't drop proportionally. You can't easily do without them, so you just have to swallow the higher cost.
Yeah.
The curve barely shifts.
You just have to find the money somewhere else, which actually brings up an incredibly relatable concept from the text. Economists call it the income effect.
Oh, this is a big one.
Right. Let's say my rent suddenly increases by $500 a month. My actual salary hasn't changed at all. But because my rent went up, I suddenly feel incredibly poor.
Your purchasing power is completely squeezed.
Exactly. I am suddenly looking at the price of premium chicken at the grocery store very differently.
And that feeling of being suddenly poor is the income effect in action. When an inelastic necessity like housing or fuel eats up a larger percentage of your finite budget, it forces a change in your behavior regarding everything else you buy.
Yeah.
You're essentially experiencing a drop in income, even if your paycheck is exactly identical.
This raises an important question, though. How does a consumer fight back against that squeeze? I mean, if the math is so rigged against us when it comes to necessities, what is our defense mechanism?
The consumer's primary lifeline is the availability of substitute goods. This is known as the substitution effect.
Okay.
If beef becomes prohibitively expensive, you switch to chicken. If brand name medication is too costly, you buy the generic.
Right.
The ability to substitute is what prevents sellers from just raising prices indefinitely.
It's fascinating how much our purchasing decisions rely on context. And the primer digs into this with another really great concept called marginal utility.
Yes.
It's basically the idea that our desire for a product drops based on how much of it we already own.
Marginal utility is such a profound psychological insight.
Hmm.
The classic example is buying a vehicle. Acquiring your very first car is, a life-altering event.
Oh, absolutely.
It completely transforms your mobility, your job prospects, your freedom. The utility of that first unit is massive. But imagine you are incredibly wealthy and you are buying your fifth car to add to your collection.
That hardly changes your daily life at all.
Exactly.
Or think about a television. That main living room TV is the center of the household's entertainment. But a fourth TV that you just stick out in the garage?
It might get turned on twice a year.
Right. The usefulness diminishes with each additional unit.
And therefore, the amount you are willing to pay for that next unit drops dramatically. It perfectly illustrates why demand curves slope downward.
Okay, so we have established the rules of the road here. We know how the engine works, we know how elasticity bends the rules, and how the income and substitution effects basically force our hands.
Yep.
But what happens when human psychology completely breaks the laws of economics? Like when the math just goes backward?
You are talking about the rare, bizarre exceptions where the law of demand fails completely. The rule breakers.
Yes. Because the golden rule is clear, right? When the
Yep.
price goes up, demand goes down. But the source outlines these incredibly fascinating scenarios where a price goes up and demand goes up right along with it.
It's counterintuitive.
Totally. Let's start with the first exception, which is Giffen goods.
So Giffen goods occur at the absolute lowest end of the economic spectrum. We are talking about low-priced dietary staples.
Okay.
Economists refer to them clinically as inferior goods, meaning they are just the basic, cheapest options available, not necessarily bad quality.
So how does the math break here?
Well, it breaks due to sheer desperation. Imagine a historical scenario, say a consumer living in poverty who survives by buying a tiny bit of expensive meat and a large amount of cheap rice to meet their daily caloric needs.
Okay, I'm with you.
Suddenly, a poor harvest causes the price of rice to increase.
Normally, the law of demand says they should buy less rice because it's more expensive now.
Right. But remember the income effect we just talked about.
Yeah.
Their budget is tiny and finite. Because the rice now costs more, it eats up almost all of their available money.
Oh, man.
They can no longer afford that tiny bit of expensive meat. But they still need to survive. They still need those baseline calories. So what is the only food they can afford to replace the meat calories with?
More of the rice.
Yes.
Wow. So the price of the staple went up and their demand for it actually increased because they were entirely priced out of their only alternative.
Exactly.
They had to substitute the luxury item with even more of the basic item that just got more expensive.
It is a really brutal paradox. It happens when the substitution effect is completely blocked off by poverty.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material introduces the exact opposite phenomenon. The other major exception to the rule happens at the absolute highest end of the wealth spectrum.
Right. Veblen goods.
Veblen goods. These are luxury items that just completely defy economic gravity.
With a Veblen good, as the price rises, the demand actually generates higher and higher. They are named after the sociologist Thorstein Veblen, who coined the term conspicuous consumption.
I was thinking about this, and, well, here's my analogy. With a Veblen good like, say, a $50,000 designer handbag or a wildly expensive sports car, it is almost as if the physical item itself isn't the actual product.
What do you mean?
Like the leather, the engine, the gears. That's not what you are buying. The invisible astronomical price tag is the product.
Oh, I see.
You are buying the price tag to wear around for everyone else to see, and the physical object is just the receipt proving you could afford it.
That is exactly the psychology at play. The utility of a Veblen good isn't its function. I mean, a cheap watch tells time just as well as a luxury one.
Right.
Its utility is its exclusivity. It's a pure status signal. If the designer were to drastically lower the price to make it affordable to everyone, they would instantly destroy its utility to the wealthy buyer.
Because anyone could have it.
Right. They would strip away the status signal and demand among their target audience would just collapse.
It is wild to think about. We go from Giffen goods, where people are forced by mathematical desperation to buy more of a more expensive staple, to Veblen goods, where people actively choose to buy more of an item, specifically because the high price is designed to exclude others.
Human behavior is deeply complex, but Even in these extreme irrational exceptions, notice that prices are still functioning as powerful signals.
Yeah.
They are just signaling different things.
Yeah.
Survival desperation on one end and immense social status on the other.
Okay, so if these laws and signaling mechanisms are so absolute, what happens when the entire globe physically stops moving? Let's take all of this theory and apply it to the ultimate modern stress tests mentioned in the primer.
The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
Exactly. Did the laws of supply and demand break during the global lockdowns?
They didn't break. They were violently validated. Yeah, the gasoline and crude oil market during that period is the perfect case study. In early 2020, as lockdowns went into effect, the global demand for transportation fuel plunged virtually overnight. Planes were grounded, commutes ended. The downward shift in the demand curve was instantaneous.
And when demand evaporates, prices fall. But the source highlights a physical reality to this that goes beyond just, a line on a graph. Prices didn't just fall. Crude oil futures briefly went negative,
They did.
meaning producers were paying buyers to take the oil away. How did that happen mechanically?
Well, it happened because the supply chain literally ran out of physical space. Oil pumps operate continuously, right?
Right.
When the world stopped driving, the gas station pumps were full. Then the underground regional tanks filled up. Then the massive supertankers at sea were filled to the brim. They effectively turned into floating storage units rather than transport vessels.
That is crazy.
There was physically nowhere to put the crude oil coming out of the ground.
So that historic negative price collapse acted as a screaming signal to the producers, basically saying, stop making this immediately.
Yes, and the cost squeeze was unimaginably severe. Producers were forced to cap wells, lay off workers, and halt drilling operations entirely.
Wow.
The supply curve reacted to the demand curve. But what's fascinating here is the physical lag in that reaction, which became incredibly apparent when the cycle reversed itself.
Right, because by 2022, the world had reopened, demand for fuel came roaring back, and oil prices spiked massively, causing immense pain at the gas pump. Why couldn't the producers just turn the supply back on to capture those high prices?
Because you cannot just flip a switch on a global supply chain.
It's not that simple.
Not at all. The high prices in 2022 were screaming at producers to make more, providing massive profit incentives. But the physical reality takes time to catch up. Capital had fled the industry during the crash. Specialized workers had moved on to other jobs. Capped wells take months and millions of dollars to restart safely. The price signal was instantaneous, but the physical supply curve has friction. It just takes time to respond.
So the pandemic essentially forced a massive involuntary income and substitution effect on the entire globe simultaneously.
It really did.
It caused chaos, but ultimately the fundamental forces of supply and demand remained absolute. The market eventually found its equilibrium again, painful as the transition was.
It proved that the mechanics of price discovery are incredibly resilient. But provided one key condition is met.
What's that?
The entire system, whether we're talking about winter coats, oil, or designer watches, relies entirely on agency.
Agency, meaning the freedom of the buyer and the seller to transact or not transact based on the price.
Exactly. The ability to look at a price tag and say, yes, that is worth it to me, or no, I am walking away. That conscious decision is the data point that feeds the entire global signaling mechanism. Without agency, price discovery completely breaks down.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about the coffee on your desk and the shoes on your feet. Understanding these intersecting curves isn't just for Wall Street investors or corporate executives.
No, not at all.
It is the fundamental user manual for everyday life. It explains why your grocery bill fluctuates, why the numbers spin faster on the gas pump, and why that clearance rack exists at the back of the store.
It connects every individual purchasing decision you make to a massive global network of resources and human labor.
But I want to leave you with one final thought, something to really mull over, building on that very last point you made about agency.
Okay.
This centuries-old system requires human beings to actively look at a price and make a conscious choice. But think about our modern, hyper-convenient digital age. Think about how many auto-renewing subscriptions you have.
Oh, wow.
Think about algorithmic smart purchasing, dynamic pricing on ride-sharing apps, or automated deliveries of household staples that just arrive at your door every single month.
We are increasingly removing human hesitation from the demand curve. We are basically outsourcing our decision-making to software.
Exactly. For so many of our transactions today, we no longer even look at the price before the money leaves our bank account. If a seller is using an algorithm to dynamically raise prices, and we are using an algorithm that automatically pays whatever the price is without us even looking.
It's just machines negotiating with machines.
Yes. If we willingly surrender our daily financial agency for the sake of convenience, are we fundamentally breaking the law of demand? And if we stop actively signaling our choices, what will that do to the equilibrium prices of tomorrow? It is definitely something to think about the next time you pick up that cup of coffee.
Well, and wonder how the invisible balancing act is deciding what you will pay for the next one.